Thanks for stopping by Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. I need to start off by saying that this installment of the telling of the deep dive into what happened with me with the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Kevin Torgerson, Chief Deputy Brian Howard, and how this all relates to what happened ultimately starting in February 19th. Is prefaced by a video that I have posted to my Rumble channel under the same name, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. And we'll get to that. I want to also tell you that in the original video that I posted 2 weeks ago, today, as you watch this, it is Constitution Day. It is a fitting day for you to be reminded of what it means for public servants to take an oath to defend the Constitution, what it means for public servants to uphold that oath, to defend the Constitution and protect it from violation and harm and violence, but not just from foreign entities and others other than themselves, but chiefly here on Constitution Day. As you watch this, it's incredibly important for you to recognize that the most danger to the Constitution does not come from foreign enemies. The most danger to the Constitution does not come from people who are standing up and resisting the tyrannical work of wannabe authoritarian tyrants. The greatest threat to the Constitution is from people like Kevin Torgerson, Chief Deputy Brian Howard, the entire Olmsted County Board, the entire Olmsted County Human Relations Department. It is the people that they hire, like Michelle, the private attorney who they use to investigate me. It's people like Kelly Don Martinez and J.D. Carlson and the entire Albert Lea City Council and their mayor. It is every single person who takes the oath and then violates it. They're the greatest danger to this republic on a daily basis. Now, before we get started, really started into talking about things, make sure you have watched the video on Rumble, wherein I speak to what was frustrating me for several days before I shot the video on the morning of May 30th. Because it is a fundamentally and foundationally important expression of my First Amendment liberties as it regards public servants. And if you haven't watched it, pause this. The link is down below in the description. Please go and watch that video and tell me in the comments how horrible and violent and wretched and dangerous I was. Got heated, but what really happened in that? So now as we proceed, I'm going to show you a video that I shot this evening. As I shoot this video, it's Thursday, September 16th, 2021. Earlier this evening, I shot a video to tell a little story, to lay the groundwork, if you will, as it were, for my interactions and relationship with Brian Howard. And it is also key to understanding everything that has happened subsequent to what the story tells. Getting ready to tell a story for the next installment of laying out the situation that took place between the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office Kevin Torgerson and Brian Howard and their persecutorial attack on me for exercising my God-given liberties of the First Amendment, or as they're enshrined in the First Amendment. And the story is going to help you understand a little bit of a history here. So this is where I live, right? So what's this have to do with the story? Well, what I need you to do, and if it's a little dark, it's going to add to helping you understand. What I need you to do is I need you to picture not September 16th of 2021, but back to a February, a year or two ago. I want you to imagine it being 3 o'clock in the morning. And I want you to imagine that it's supposed to be your day off. It's a Tuesday. It's supposed to be your day off after working 60 hours the previous week. And you go to bed early because you're going to get up and go and work an overtime shift that you didn't have to sign up for, but you do on a very regular basis. Not just because you're greedy and want the money, but because you know that other people have family and other things, and you didn't have kids to worry about the way other people do. That's the truth. That's why I took the overtime shifts, the ones that I did, which were quite a few, frankly. But you're taking the overtime shift to help out because the ADC is short-staffed and has been short-staffed for several years, and it has just continued to get worse. So much so that we even had to have a retention organizational conversation with the HR department and the Olmsted County Adult Detention Center staff and part of the Deputy Sheriff's Association, which is a union. And so you sign up for that shift, you go to bed early the night before, you get up and you walk over to the window and you look outside and you see that it snowed quite a bit overnight. Now, normally snow is not a big deal, but you weren't prepared for it. Your driveway is passable, but then you come out here to the apron of your driveway and you look up to the top of the hill and you see that your street that runs behind your house, which effectively serves as your only egress from the property, is still full of snow, and that it's blocked off at the end because the city has plowed these streets but hasn't touched the upper streets or the secondary areas yet. You look up and you see that, and you look down here and you see all the way down here that this is still full of snow as well. Now, what's the big deal, right? You're saying to yourselves, what's going on, TC? Why are you telling us this story? Once again, I want you to notice, back out of the driveway, back out, and either back your rear end up and go down the hill, or you back down and try to go up. There's no way you're going to clear the bank of snow that's been packed in at the head of the hill, at the top of the hill there. And this is one of the steeper hills in town. And you look down and you see what you see on a regular basis in winter and in Spring Valley, is that the city has been Johnny on the spot with cleaning the surface streets, but not much for the secondaries. And so you come down here and you note that the city's piled all the snow up at the end of the street here. And it's almost as if they've pushed all of the snow from this street all the way down here, and it's all piled up right in here, right? All up to here, okay? Now, why is that a big deal? Years ago, I used to be able to come down my hill, turn under power, but turn and make the run and get out over here to this street and go my merry way on to work early in the morning when the roads weren't clear. Several years ago, the city contracted to have this redone, and some weird engineering issue made it so that they couldn't continue the street. So this street ended and I lost my egress. So now effectively I have nothing but uphills to get up to. So what happened? Well, here's what happened. And I know it's a little dark, but it's part of the story, remember? What happened? So I initially backed out of the driveway, pointed the rear of my vehicle to the north, down the hill, and attempted to go up. Okay? I made the attempt to go up. thinking I knew there was no way I was going to clear that snowbank down there. And I thought maybe I'd give it a shot up there. Well, I couldn't get the traction because there was a layer of ice that had formed underneath the snow, so I couldn't get any real traction. So I did the only thing I could do, is I backed down the hill. Now, I want you to imagine we're backing down the hill, and the snow and the ice start to pull you over, and the next thing you know, you get pulled in just enough that your vehicle comes up and hits these trees on the side with a mirror. Now, you shatter your passenger side mirror, you get enough traction to get forward, but you can't get all the way up the hill, so you got to back all the way down again. And as you're backing down, you lose control, not in a haphazard sort of way, but you back right into the snowbank because you can't keep any real traction, and now you're buried. So what's TC do? TC immediately gets on the phone and calls into A platoon, which is the platoon that's working that day. Or no, excuse me, it was B platoon because it was the night crew still on. And I said, hey, look, sorry, I signed up for the overtime shift, but I'm stuck and I'm not going to get out for hours. Well, what did I do? I put effort into it, right? Came all the way up here, got my snowblower and my shovels, and I went down and I cleared out the area where I was stuck. And I had to dig out, crawl down, get underneath my vehicle, down there, picture it, dig out from underneath your vehicle to finally get the traction, and couldn't get up the hill because it was just packed. There's snow all in it, right? So I cleared off from what you see down there at the end, all the way up. I cleared off enough, threw down some salt, cleared out my driveway, and pulled into my garage after 3 to 4 hours of struggling. Now, what's the big deal, right? You just missed a shift. We're going to get to that when I get back inside the studio. We're going to tell exactly why this is important to how I was treated by Chief Deputy Brian Howard and the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office. So as I said in the video, we're going to talk now about Chief Deputy Brian Howard. The day after the snow event, where I was unable to make it in for a overtime shift, wherein I called in, as you know. I happen to be working in the work release facility. It's the minimum security facility where people who have been convicted and doing their time are allowed to now go out into the community and have a job and look for work and on and on and on. And I signed up for this overtime shift to work there, as well as being assigned to that particular facility for my regular shift the following day. I had set up a goal to work in the work release facility as much as possible so I could learn the intricacies of that job. And because I wanted to use that as a launching platform into my retirement. I wanted to get away from the stress and the pressure of the regular maximum security facility that was the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office Adult Detention Center. And so I took as many shifts over there as I could get. This was a couple of years ago. My sergeant at the time, who I respect and admire and would die for, was who I also love as a friend. Happened to be stopping by on his daily rounds to find out how things were going in the work release facility when he received a phone call, and I immediately recognized the voice. It was Brian Howard. And Sergeant said, "What can I do for you, Chief?" Chief said, "Well, I need to talk to you about Mr. Pearson." I could hear this very clearly. And of course, that piqued my interest. It got my attention. My ears perked up, and now I'm really paying attention. And I hear Well, he signed up for an overtime shift and he called in. Sarge said, "Yep, I'm aware. He told me what happened." He said, "Well, that we need to talk about that because I know people in Spring Valley, and I know for a fact that the roads weren't bad. So I want you to stop and understand that what Brian Howard just did in that moment was attack my integrity and my ethics." That's the context. Now, the video that I shared with you may seem very detailed, but I want people to understand that when I literally tell people, for me, going to work at the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office Adult Detention Center is literally an uphill battle during a snowstorm, it literally is. Now, my sergeant tried to explain it to him, and it never went anywhere. I never received a reprimand. I never received a verbal coaching or counseling, and that's much to the credit of my friend and the sergeant at the time. But that tells you the personality. It tells you the mindset of Brian Howard. Who did he think he was to tell anybody else that my situation wasn't what I said it was? And what right did he have? And what about my behavior ever indicated in any way, shape, or form that he needed to question my honesty, the veracity of what I was saying to my first line supervisor? I am not the guy who calls in all the time. I am not the guy who makes up reasons to not be at work. Now, from February 19th of 2021 until April 30th of 2021, it became a daily battle to go to work. And that was brought on by Brian Howard, who was just following orders from Sheriff Kevin the Tyrant Torgerson. So let's go now from this context of how Howard worked and operated and thought of me to the night of May 30th, 2020, in the master control post, as I mentioned in the original video, and what was said to me. Now, remember, he approached me, he makes small talk, which he never did. Literally not the guy he makes small talk with. And I also want to say, I want to apologize for the language that I use at certain points in the first part of the first video. It's not going to happen here. So that being said, we're going to talk now about how he approached me and my response. And we've gone into detail about it. We've talked about how he tried to tell me I needed to use caution. We talked about how he couldn't point to where I violated policy and procedure. He didn't once tell me I was being formally counseled verbally. I never took it that way. And we'll address some of this later on in future videos. And the only thing that he knew he had me on was the fact that in his mind, had me on was the fact that I shot the video while I was driving using a hands-free device. And as I've acknowledged in previous videos, and even now, I said to him, that'll never happen again. He also indicated in that conversation that he agreed with pretty much everything I was saying. Now, I want it to be understood that Brian Howard did not go watching these videos on his own. Somebody reported to Kevin Torgerson what had happened. Now, it was either Michelle Ness, who is his internet spy, or this Kyle Brandt, whatever, who is his social media guru, a position that was created for Kevin Torgerson, by the way, by Kevin Torgerson at the expense of taxpayers. The Olmsted County Sheriff's Office has in their employ a man whose entire job is to walk around shooting video to polish the image of Tyrant Torgerson. So it was either Michelle Ness, who's that's their job. You can dispute it and you can say whatever you want. It was either Michelle Ness or this Kyle guy, or Torgerson is doing it. Don't believe that, and I don't believe it was Howard, or somebody from the community, probably someone like Mayor Kim Norton, complained about what I said, and they knew they didn't have me on policy and procedure, so they had to come up with something. Now, do I believe that people had been watching me for quite some time? Absolutely. Launched the channel on April 25th, so a couple of weeks I had put videos out and done some commentary. I believe that they were well aware. Doesn't bother me. I don't care. What bothers me is that they pay people to do that as well. So one way, shape, or form, something took place. Torgerson was made aware, and he called up Howard and he said, "You need to deal with this upstart." And that's what Howard did that night. And we're not going to rehash all of it, but I will tell you this, that immediately after that conversation, I was so angry and I was so concerned with what they were doing. I went through and I shut down all of my social media for a couple of weeks because I needed to re-gauge and rethink. I want you to let that sink in. The Supreme Court rules that as a chilling effect, as a stifling effect. Other courts have ruled on that as well. So as I had said in other videos, I had, for lack of better terminology, I ruminated on how frustrated I was. And I wrote an email, and we're going to take a look at the first email that I wrote. So you probably can't read this, but this is the email that I sent. And this is how it reads. It's from me at my email address to Brian Howard at his email address. Also copied in myself, blind copied myself in. I believe it was that morning as I sent it. And this is how it reads. Chief Deputy Howard, as regards our conversation from Saturday night, 5/30, 2020, in the master control post, I am hoping that you can offer some clarification. I fully recognize that the concern with a live video being shot while driving, even using a hands-free device. However, I am left somewhat concerned with the overall gist of the conversation. I want to lay out my perception of what was said and then ask you for clarification. First, I want to reemphasize that I go to great lengths to ensure that I never speak about my work or my position. I understand the risk and perceptions that could be arrived at if that were included in my activity and content, especially if the person speaking is perceived to be speaking on behalf of the organization. Again, that is why I never speak of my occupation or about my employer. Where I am looking for clarification is in several areas. It was stated that nothing I have posted or said is in violation of any policy, and I am thankful that this was acknowledged. It was also stated that I am not in trouble, and again, I am thankful for that. However, I was also advised that I use caution in either my post or video content due to the nature of the current emotional climate of our culture / society. Was also stated that even though I never identify my work or place of employment, most people know us and know where we work. Considering this, could you please offer some guidance as to what aspects of my content could be problematic? I am asking this respectfully and in a desire to not run afoul of policy. At the same time, I was left with the perception that the advice to be cautious was also somewhat pointed in that my content was being monitored in some way. I have subsequently and temporarily suspended my video post and content as I have considered our conversation from 5/30, 2020. However, my desire is to be able to freely speak my mind as a private citizen on issues that I see as problematic while maintaining distance from my work and employment. I do that out of respect for the office and position of the sheriff. I do not simply get as close to the line as I can without crossing it. I try to stay as far away from the line as possible while also exercising what I see as the civic duty of all citizens. I know that you are very busy with everything that could be going on with planned events over the weekend, so respond as you have time, sir. I thank you ahead of time for helping me understand this better. Respectfully, Deputy Pearson, badge number 1734. Now, I want you to note, June 5th, 2020, 5:55 a.m. I sent that morning, literally as I was walking out of the housing unit that I was working in. If I remember correctly, it was 1849 housing unit. I will read this for you, especially for those of you that might be listening. From Brian Howard, Friday, June 19th, 2020, 9:14 a.m. to Pearson Todd. Todd, I have not forgot about you. I just have not had time to stop in and visit with you. I would prefer to talk about this in person as compared to email so we can have a dialogue with any questions. Take care. Brian T. Howard, Chief Deputy Detention Services, Olmsted County Sheriff, 507-328-6837. 507-328-6837. Now, note, this is sent at 9:14 a.m. I sent my original email after several days of contemplation. I sent that email on June 5th at 5:55 a.m. This is 14 days. 14 days after I requested feedback. 14 days that I went. So you could see it right here if you could see the cursor. 14 days he waited to respond, and this was my response, or his response to me. This is what I got. We'll talk about it in person so we can have a dialogue with any questions. And I'm sorry, he thinks he's smart, but he's not. This is moronic. If he didn't know that I was sending these home to myself, he is dumber than a boxer ox and deserves whatever opinions people have of him at this time. This was his way, and I guarantee you, for 2 weeks, they were counseling on what to do. And he was told, do not give him any written direction. I guarantee you this was what was said. Promise you. While I may never be able to offer proof of this, I'm telling you, he was told, do not give him any written direction. Because they knew they had stepped in it already. They knew. They tried, but they knew I had just pinned them down. They were already in a losing fight. All of their power and all of their might and all their position, I had just defeated them. And now they were scrambling. And that's why it took them 2 full weeks and some hours to reply to me. 4 hours and 19 minutes. Now, this was my response. Brian, this was dated Monday, June 22nd, 2020 at 6:17 p.m. Because I was gone when he sent that email. So not only did he send it 14 days after, he sent it when he knew I wasn't going to be working. And he sent it at a time when he knew I wouldn't see it until the evening. Dated June 22nd at 6:17 p.m., referencing yada, yada, yada. Brian, I understand that you are very busy and that me being on nights makes connecting very difficult. If it works to connect when we come back to days on July 6th, I can wait until then. Thank you for letting me know you saw the original email. Now, I would like to tell you that what occurred at that time was me being summoned into the chief deputy's office or getting subsequent emails explaining to me that what I was doing that was wrong needed to be corrected, and here's how it needed to be corrected, and here's what was wrong and why it was wrong. But that would be a lie. That would be deceptive, because that never happened. Never happened. At no point from the morning of June 5th, you know what? No, I'm going to go back. At no point from the evening of May 30th until February 19th, when I was summoned and handed my letter, I wanted to be understood. At no point did Brian Howard, in his capacity as the Chief Deputy Director of Detention Services, after I, as a deputy who had been told to be careful, who had been cautioned about my content, who had been told that what I was doing could possibly be trouble for me and for the sheriff's office, at no point after I sought clarification did Chief Deputy Brian Howard ever approach me, ever call me into his office and have an amicable, friendly conversation with me, telling me, hey, I totally understand we're not trying to infringe on your First Amendment freedoms, your First Amendment, your liberties as enshrined in the First Amendment. None of that. None of that ever happened. Not once. Not once. I will sit here and I will put my hand on a Bible. In fact, I will open up the Bible to Romans chapter 13, and I will swear on Romans chapter 13, the Word of God. I will take an oath to this day that not once did Brian Howard ever approach me to talk to me about it. And I have the video evidence of that to prove it. Brian Howard, in a cowardly and spineless and panty-waisted, sissy way, never once approached me to tell me what it was that I needed to not do, what I could do, and what I shouldn't do. And I can't wait to put that video out for you all to see. If I sound angry, I am. This is justice, or just indignation. This is righteous anger, righteous indignation. Someone in the sheriff's office, once again, whether it's Michelle Ness or the social media guy Kyle or the sheriff or Brian Howard, dropped the ball. They either fielded a complaint from somebody like Kim Norton or one of her little lackeys, or they had someone like Michelle or Kyle watching me and reporting to the sheriff what was going on. And so they watched that video on the morning of, and they called up the sheriff or emailed the sheriff or something. Something happened. Somebody in a position of what we call authority, of power, watched my content, didn't like my content, or knew the sheriff wouldn't like my content, and they reported it, and they sent Brian Howard in to dictate to me what I was doing wrong and to warn me to fire a shot across the bow. And it was the wrong thing for them to do, because they knew. And that's why it took him 2 weeks to get back to me. And it's why from we're just going to go June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, and February. 9 months. 9 months. Brian Howard didn't have the guts, he didn't have the courage, and he didn't have the moxie as a deputy, as a sworn officer, as a chief deputy, as a senior supervisor in the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office, one, to stand up to Tyrant Torgerson, to Kevin, and say, I'm sorry, Kevin, I know what you're doing, and I know why. I understand it doesn't look good for you and your polished image and all these smiley pictures that you put up of yourself everywhere. I get it. I understand. But I'm not doing this. I am not getting involved in this. You want him disciplined, you send somebody else. Brian Howard could have done that, but he didn't. Like a good little sycophant, he followed orders. And so everybody who wants to give Brian Howard a pat on the back and say, oh, he couldn't help it, it's his job, he should have had the cojones to stand up to Torgerson and say, You want to get rid of me? Fine, I'll retire. But I am not going after this deputy. I am not going after that guy because he's right. He has a freedom. He has the liberty to do this. He could have done that. He could have done that, but he didn't because he wanted to do the bidding of his master, Kevin the Tyrant Torgerson. Because everybody knows that when you don't do what Torgerson says, it's hell for you. And people have been coming out of the woodwork since the first video. People who have fought Torgerson and won, and people who have fought Torgerson are no longer there. They're coming out of the woodwork and they're talking to me and they're supporting me. And I am not going to push them to tell their stories because it is very painful and very difficult. And some of them are literally terrified they're going to lose their jobs if they talk because they think that Torgerson will pull strings. Every single one of them that I've talked to. Now, what does that tell you? And Brian did it. And Brian Howard, this is for you. I don't have any personal animus against you, but the professional animus that I have towards you is this. You are no different than in the moral and ethical sense. You are no different than the men who were put on trial in Nuremberg. And when they were asked, why did you do what you did? And their response was, I was just following orders. Brian Howard, you would have done the same thing. The difference between you and the concentration camp guards is time and severity. That's it. Brian Howard, as a public servant, you had a duty to interpose yourself between me, your subordinate, and the sheriff. And you chose to side with the sheriff. You chose to just follow orders. That's cowardice. I got news for you, Brian Howard. You are an ignorant bully, and it shows in your acquiescence to another ignorant bully in Kevin Torgerson. You stepped in this, Brian Howard. You did this to yourself. You could have stood up to him and said, this is unconstitutional and this is wrong. But the problem is you didn't recognize it was unconstitutional because you don't know the Constitution. You do not know the Constitution. All of this commentary is directed at you in your official capacity. Brian, you said, whether you use the words or not, I just did what I was told to do. I was just following orders. And I may not be able to come after you civilly. I may not be able to come after you on the constitutional levels. I may not be able to come after you on a civil rights violation. But I'm going to make sure that everyone knows that you lick the boots of Kevin Torgerson because that's what the kind of person you are. You're not a man. You're a sycophant. Have somebody look that up for you and read it to you and explain it to you. I got news for you. The person that worked in your position before would have sat down and had a conversation with me and explained to me. And then and we are diametrically opposed politically. But Stacy Sinner was 2 times, 100 times, 150 times more interested in her staff and the well-being of her staff than you ever have been and ever will be. Do the entire Olmsted County Sheriff's Office a service and resign your position, retire, and just whatever public service, because you're not a public servant. You're just a boot-licking sycophant. And as long as you serve in that position, no one in the ADC is going to be safe from persecution. Now for you, Kevin Torgerson. You send other people to do your dirty work because you're not man enough to do it yourself. You're a coward too. And you're the worst kind of coward. You're a coward with power. Someday we're going to bump into each other and I'm going to say, how you doing, Tyrant Torgy? And you're going to turn red like you do. And you're not going to be able to do a darn thing about it because You don't have any control over me. Now, here's a good thing for you, Kevin and Brian. The next few videos, the next couple of videos are probably not going to have anything to do with you ultimately. I might talk about you a little bit, but they're all going to be directed to people that really started the ball rolling. So take a breather. The next few weeks, you're fine. You're fine. But we're coming back. We're going to come back to what you did to me starting on February 19th. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the months and months and months and months and months that you had people spying on me, and the months and months and months and months and months of fuming and festering that you did before you finally ordered Howard to write me up. We're coming to that, but you get a little bit of a break. But we're not done. And there are people out there right now talking about running for office against you. You didn't think it would happen, did you? It's going to happen. They're coming for your job. And we're going to do our level best to make sure. Miss my team. And for my team, if any of you have the bravery to watch this, because I know everybody's terrified of being associated with me right now. If you have the bravery to watch this, you really need to rethink where you are career-wise. Because Torgerson's not your friend, and Howard will throw you under the bus to keep his job. Till next time. This is for you, Kevin and Brian. Sic Semper, Tyrannus.
Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.